They dragged her through the dirt like she was already dead. The rope bit into her wrists with every step, the coarse fibers scraping skin that had already learned the feel of pain too well. Stones cut into her bare feet, but she kept moving because stopping only earned kicks and laughter. The crowd pressed in from both sides, a wall of faces she had known all her life, faces that now looked at her like she was something rotten pulled from the earth. Half-blood, someone spat. The word followed her, echoing, growing louder as others joined in. It had always been there, whispered behind doors, hissed when they thought she couldn't hear. Today it was shouted proudly, as if saying it out loud made cruelty righteous. She had been born between worlds, her mother from one, her father from another, and this town had never forgiven her for existing in both. Her arms trembled, not just from fear, but from exhaustion. She had worked their fields, washed their clothes, tended their children when sickness came. None of that mattered now. In their eyes, blood erased deeds. Always had. The tree came into view at the edge of town, rising from the earth like a scar that never healed. It was old, older than most of the people surrounding her, and its branches twisted toward the sky as if begging for mercy that never came. She remembered climbing it once as a child, her mother laughing softly below, warning her not to go too high. Back then, it had been a place of shade and safety. Now it waited for her like a sentence already passed. They shoved her forward, and she stumbled, barely catching herself before falling to her knees. A rough hand yanked her back up by the rope binding her wrists. She tasted blood where her lip split, but still she didn't scream. She had learned long ago that screaming only gave them satisfaction. Someone threw the rope over the branch with practiced ease. Another fashioned the noose, fingers quick, efficient, as if this were just another chore to be finished before supper. When they pulled the loop over her head, the coarse hemp brushed her skin, and her breath hitched despite her efforts to stay calm. She looked around, searching, though she didn't know for what. A friendly face, a single flicker of doubt, someone who might say this was wrong. A woman she had once shared bread with turned away, eyes fixed on the ground. A man she had helped nurse back from fever crossed his arms, jaw set, as if convincing himself he had no choice. The rope tightened, her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst free of her chest. The sky above was painfully blue, wide and indifferent. A bird circled overhead, unaware of the hatred coiled beneath its wings. She focused on that patch of sky, afraid that if she looked back at the crowd, the fear would finally break her. Her mother's voice drifted into her mind, soft and worn with love. You belong to yourself first, she used to say. Never let them tell you otherwise. Her mother had died believing that. She wondered if that belief would follow her now, wherever she was going. A shove sent her stumbling beneath the branch. Someone laughed. Another spat at her feet. Do it, a voice called out. The rope was pulled upward. The noose cinched tight around her neck, stealing her breath in a sudden, violent rush. Panic surged, sharp and blinding. Her feet barely touched the ground as the world tilted and spun. She clawed at the rope instinctively, fingers numb, lungs burning. Sounds blurred together, cheering, shouting, the rush of blood in her ears. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, closing fast. So this was it, not justice, not mercy, just hatred wearing the mask of certainty. As her strength began to fail, she squeezed her eyes shut and whispered a prayer she wasn't sure anyone would hear, not for herself, but that her life might mean something more than the word they had used to end it. She never heard the hooves at first. The pressure around her neck tightened, stealing the world in sharp, brutal pulls. Her lungs screamed for air that wouldn't come. Her fingers clawed uselessly at the rope, nails tearing, vision blurring as the crowd's noise faded into a distant roar. The sky fractured into spinning shards of blue and white. Her body kicked on instinct, desperate and ungraceful, fighting an ending she had never chosen. Just as the darkness surged forward, hooves thundered. The sound tore through the moment like a gunshot. Heavy, fast, close. Someone shouted, not the jeering kind. This voice was furious, commanding, a sound that demanded attention whether anyone wanted to give it or not. Heads turned. Fear rippled through the crowd, confusion breaking their cruel certainty. The rope jerked violently. For a split second, she thought she was imagining it, another cruel trick of a dying mind. Then steel flashed in front of her eyes. A blade, sharp, unhesitating. The tension vanished. She dropped hard, the world slamming back into her body. Air rushed into her lungs in a painful, burning gasp. She collapsed into strong arms before the ground could claim her, coughing violently, chest heaving as if relearning how to live. She barely registered the knife hitting the dirt. The rancher stood there, solid and unmovable, one arm wrapped tightly around her as if letting go was not an option. His other hand still held the rope, severed clean through. His chest rose and fell beneath her cheek, steady and powerful, grounding her in a way nothing else ever had. Enough. The word cut through the crowd, low and dangerous. She forced her eyes open, vision swimming. Faces stared back, shocked, pale, suddenly uncertain. The same people who had shouted moments ago now stepped back, fear cracking through their righteousness. The rancher lifted his head slowly, eyes burning with something far colder than anger. His presence seemed to stretch outward, filling the space beneath the tree. You don't get to decide who lives, he said. Not today, not ever. Someone muttered, she's half. The rancher's grip tightened protectively. He didn't look down at her when he spoke again. She's mine. The word fell like a hammer. Mine. The crowd went still. That single word shifted everything, ownership in a world that understood nothing else. Claim, protection, challenge. She belongs to no one, a man protested weakly. The rancher finally turned his gaze toward him, slow and deliberate. Then why were you killing her? Silence answered. She trembled in his arms, shock setting in now that her body realized it was still alive. Her throat burned, every breath hurt, but his hold never loosened, his hand firm at her back, steadying her as if he knew exactly how close she was to shattering. Anyone wants to try again, he continued, voice calm but lethal, will answer to me. No one moved. The rope still dangled from the tree, swaying gently in the wind, suddenly stripped of its power. The tree that had watched so many cruelties stood mute, its shadow broken. She pressed her fingers into the rancher's coat without thinking, grounding herself in the feel of solid fabric and warmth. He noticed. She felt it in the subtle shift of his arm, the way he drew her closer instead of pulling away. You're safe, he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. I've got you. The word struck deeper than anything else. Safe was not a word she had known. Not here, not ever. Someone dropped a torch. It hissed as it hit the dirt, smoke curling upward like a final, failed threat. One by one, people began to retreat, shame and fear finally outweighing hatred. No one apologized. No one met her eyes. The rancher didn't wait for them to disappear. He bent slightly and lifted her fully into his arms, as if her weight was nothing. She let herself go slack, exhaustion crashing over her now that survival was no longer urgent. The crowd parted instinctively as he walked through them, daring anyone to stop him. At the edge of town, he paused long enough to glance back. This ends, he said simply. Then he turned away, carrying her toward a future she had never believed she was allowed to have. The ride away from town felt unreal, as if the world had slipped sideways and forgotten to correct itself. She leaned against the rancher's chest as the horse moved steadily beneath them, each step sending a dull ache through her bruised body. The land opened wide around them, empty fields, rolling earth, the kind of quiet that didn't judge. Her breathing was still ragged, every inhale scraping her throat raw, but it came easier now, no longer stolen by rope or fear. He kept one arm around her waist, solid and sure, the other guiding the reins. He rode as if nothing could touch them out here, as if the hatred they'd left behind couldn't follow. After a while, he slowed the horse near a small creek and helped her down. The sudden change in balance made her sway, and his hands were there instantly, steadying her before she could fall. Easy, he said. She nodded, unable to find words yet. He led her to the water's edge, knelt, and filled his hands. When he offered the water, she hesitated only a moment before drinking. It soothed the burn in her throat, cooled the heat behind her eyes. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely more than breath. He studied her face carefully, as if memorizing it. What's your name? The question startled her, not because she didn't have one, but because no one had asked it gently in a long time. She told him. He repeated it once, quietly, like it mattered. Like she mattered. They rode again as dusk bled into night. When his ranch finally came into view, a modest house, strong fences, warm lamplight glowing in the windows, her chest tightened with a new kind of fear. Safety felt foreign, fragile. Inside, he helped her sit by the fire and brought clean water, then wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. His movements were careful, respectful, never assuming permission. That restraint calmed her more than words. I called you mine, he said suddenly, standing a few steps away. Back there, her breath caught. I needed them to stop, he continued. I won't force anything on you. If you want to leave when you're strong enough, I'll help you do that. She looked at the fire, at the steady flames licking upward, and thought of the rope, the tree, the way the crowd had turned away so easily. She thought of his arm around her, unyielding, protective, asking for nothing in return. I don't know where I'd go, she said honestly. You don't have to decide tonight, he replied. Or tomorrow. Silence settled between them, comfortable and new. Outside, the night moved on without menace. Inside, warmth wrapped around her like a promise. Later, when exhaustion finally pulled her toward sleep, he showed her a small room and placed a lantern on the table. I'll be right outside, he said. Just in case. She watched him leave, the door clicking softly shut behind him. For the first time since she could remember, she lay down without fear of being woken by cruelty. Morning came gently. Sunlight spilled through the window, soft and golden. For a moment, she forgot where she was, and then remembered everything. Her heart raced until she heard the familiar sounds of life outside. Footsteps, a horse snorting, the clink of tools. Real, present. She stepped outside and found him repairing a fence. He looked up, concern flickering across his face until he saw she was standing on her own. You slept, he said, relief evident. Yes. He handed her a cup of coffee, warm and grounding. They stood together, watching the land stretch endlessly ahead. They'll talk, she said quietly. They'll come. He met her gaze. Let them. This land answers to me. She believed him, not because he was strong, though he was, but because he had already proven he would stand when it mattered most. As the sun rose higher, she felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not love, not yet, but possibility, and after a lifetime of being told she didn't belong, that was more than enough to begin again.